Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome for another edition of the video productions by the Ortolino Company. My company, I'm Dieter Vanschura. I'm the owner, unfortunately, and we sell Japanese prints in weekly online auctions, and we produce these videos, always about Japanese prints. And today's video is for beginners in Japanese prints. So, you're an experienced collector, you're a professional, there's the door. Goodbye. What do I want to explain today? I want to explain what Osaka prints are. Osaka prints. Well, a few images and a few real prints may show more than a bunch of my endless words, so let me show to you two typical Osaka prints. Well, this is an actor portrait, just like the ones on the monitor. And if you ever saw a Japanese print before, a typical Japanese print before, you may now recognize that this one is a little bit smaller than the normal prints made in Edo. Edo, the old name for today's Tokyo. I'll show you another example. This is a so-called diptych, yeah, because it's made of two panels, two sheets pasted together. And also this one is a little bit smaller in size, my friend. So, what are Osaka prints? And another question which is connected with this first question, what are kamigata? Osaka prints are simply prints made in Osaka, the second largest city in Japan. And what are kamigata? Even easier, kamigata is just another word for Osaka prints and vice versa. So congratulations, you've learned the first two lessons. Osaka prints, prints made in Osaka, kamigata, exactly the same as Osaka prints. Well, of course, you want to learn a little bit more about Osaka prints. So let me tell you, the majority of these ukiyo-e, as they are also called. Ukiyo-e is another word for Japanese prints, especially for the old Japanese prints. Well, the majority of ukiyo-e was made in Edo. Edo, the old name for today's Tokyo, and already during the at the end of the 18th century, Edo was a huge metropolis, an estimated 1 million inhabitants at that time. It was probably the second largest city in the world at that time after London. And Edo was the dominating center in Japan for printmaking. Printmaking, the same as bookmaking, and there was a dominating print shop in Edo called the Utagawa School. Also, this confusing for a beginner. Has nothing to do with the school where your children are going. No, this was best described a huge commercial print shop, and it was not the only one in Edo, but the Utagawa was the dominating one. And well, there were also small print shops in Osaka, and their prints a little bit different from what their colleagues in Edo produced, and therefore Osaka prints are today a genre of its own for collectors of Japanese prints. So what's so different? The Osaka printmakers were nearly exclusively specialized on one subject, and this subject was the Japanese kabuki theater. Like the ones I showed you before, or these ones, prints showing kabuki actors. Kabuki actors were at that time like today's movie stars, yeah? The kabuki theater was extremely popular, also for the common people. And secondly, the smaller size, my friends. Yeah? And this, why are Osaka prints often smaller, especially those made, let's say, after 1840s, 1850s, second half of 19th century. Well, this has something to do with censorship laws. And now I have to talk about the so-called tempo reforms. The tempo reforms of 1841 and 1842, they were an attempt by the rulers in Japan at that time, the so-called shogunate. And the shogunate, there was a clan from the Tokugawa family, and at that time already they had problems, already pretty much in decline. And these tempo reforms were a desperate attempt to solve severe state problems by cracking down what they considered luxury and moral decline. And kabuki theater and kabuki prints were regarded as luxury and moral decline. So the publisher, they got all kind of bans for making kabuki prints. There were restrictions in the number of colors they were allowed to use. There were the price was limited, and a few more things. And the publisher thought, okay, let's make them a little bit smaller, and then they look more like luxury. And this is actually the reason why these prints today often are smaller in size. So roughly in the early 1850s, these tempo reforms were no longer enforced, but the small size remained. And from the shock of the tempo reforms and this impact, actually the Osaka printmakers had never fully recovered. It's not only a difference in size and in this concentration on the kabuki theater, also the style is different. When you're more experienced, you will immediately recognize an Osaka print. It's a different style. I would even call it a little bit naive compared to Edo prints, for instance, by Kuniyoshi or by Kunisada. Nearly 20 years ago, we had a friend, and he had studied art, and he wrote articles from us. He was a very smart guy and knew much more about Japanese prints than I know today. And he wrote an article commissioned by us about Osaka prints, and now I want to make a short quotation from one of these articles where he describes a little bit what's so different in style. Okay, beginning of quotation, my friend. The eyes are often excessively large and almost over-expressive. Heads are sometimes stuck on bodies at incredible angles, and these bodies themselves can at times be twisted into seemingly impossible poses. End of quotation. I show you afterwards a few examples. And these poses to which he refers, this is something special from the Japanese kabuki theater. It's called me pose, but I'm not going to explain that now. I explained it. Yeah, I explained it in another video. Check YouTube for me pose or shibaraku. Let's talk now a little bit about the artists of the Osaka prints. I could now name a bunch of artists, but I want to name only one. He's the most important one, Konishi Hirosada. And we do not even know when he was born, and we don't know when he died, but he was active, and we know that from his prints. Well, roughly between 1820 and 1864. And he was, of all the Osaka printmakers, he was the most productive ones. Now, let's talk a little bit about the market for Osaka prints. And this is a nice and a good market for beginners in Japanese prints. It's a small market niche, but usually prices for Osaka prints are rather modest. Like, for instance, the two that I just showed to you. Modest for Osaka prints, so from the second half of the 19th century. Be careful. Early Osaka prints, or Osaka prints with very unusual and popular subjects. They can be quite expensive, very expensive even, but the large bunch, the large bulk is very good for a limited budget. And when you're a beginner in Japanese prints, don't start by buying extremely expensive prints. Start small. This is just my advice. In case you want to know more about Osaka prints, go to Google, type in Kamigata or Osaka prints. I mean, you've now learned that's the same. And there you will find a few articles by Artelino. You find them all on our website, artelino.com, or try Google. We usually show up on the first page. And there is also a website. It's a gallery website by John Fiorillo and Peter Uliaki, who is completely devoted and specialized in Osaka prints. I just want to show that shortly to you. So where's my mouse? For heaven's sake. Yeah, here you see Osaka prints, and John Fiorillo and Peter Uliaki know a lot about Osaka prints, more than I do, yeah. Recently, we received a wonderful new consignment of Osaka prints by a collector. And last night, put all these, no, not all, just a few, on a new article. It's titled Kamigata. And in the coming auctions, we will offer these prints. And I now want to show you a few examples so that you get a better feeling what are Osaka, respectively, Kamigata. I hope the mouse will work now. You see, well, this is here, this article, and there, well, the flagship print. It's a beauty. It's really beautiful. Also an actor portrait. There you see all actor portraits. Here, I should go a little bit back so that you can see that more easily. Diptychs and triptychs are also quite typical for these Osaka prints. Here we have a triptych and another one. And last but not least, that's interesting. That's beautiful. And these are, yeah, I told you, not all Osaka prints show kabuki scenes or kabuki actors. Well, these subjects then are more expensive and more in demand regarding market prices. Two more examples. Okay, I think this gave you a little bit of an impression what Osaka prints are. As I said before, we will offer a very nice collection of Osaka prints in our coming auctions. So if you're interested, take a look at our catalogs. Would be pleased to see you. And of course, I would be pleased to see you for our next video. And until then, please stay safe and have a good week. Goodbye.